Alright, so check this out. I died last night, but I'm still here. This actually happened last week. It just took me some time to come to terms with it. I got a phone call from my next door neighbor late in the evening asking if I can help him move a mattress into his upstairs. His mom is ill and has a big heavy sleep number bed. I of course ran over to help because they're great neighbors. I get over there and his friend, who's also a priest, was there to help. I helped them figure out how to separate the mattress from the bed so that we could fit it upstairs. We get it all moved up and back in place when my neighbor asks if I can help them move an armoire upstairs too. I think nothing of it, and we pull it out of his travel trailer and we start bringing it up the front stairs of his house. This is where I died. The front stairs are 11 steps. I was on the lower end of the armoire, about 6 steps up, when my neighbor and his friend lose a handle on the armoire and it comes crashing down on me, and I fall backwards towards the pavement. I then wake up in my dining room to my phone ringing and my wife asking me if I'm going to answer the phone. I answer the phone, and it's my neighbor asking me if I can help him move a bed upstairs for his mom. I go over there and meet his priest friend again, as if this is the first time I've met him. I say I can help with the bed, but I can't help with the armoire. My neighbor was like, "How'd you know about the armoire?" I then proceeded to tell them that I'm pretty sure I just died. I spent the next hour talking with the priest. He had so many questions. My neighbor didn't believe it until I described the upstairs bedroom in perfect detail down to the metal mattress frame on the floor and the intricate headboard leaning against the wall, and I'd never been upstairs in their house before. The priest asked me what I saw after I died. I told him that I never actually experienced the death, but before it happened, I had woken up at my dining room table. Country roads did not take me home. Okay, I believe I may have posted this a few years ago, shortly after it happened. I'm writing again because I was recently on a call with my mother, and without prompting, she brought it up. The story is about 5 years old now, give or take, for a few months. And for a while, I thought maybe I had dreamt it or something, but my mom corroborated my story. I was 18 at the time, and it was my first Thanksgiving that I wasn't in school. My mom and I were taking our usual 7-hour trip up north, but on holidays this is more like 9 hours, to our family in New Jersey for the holiday. We used to live up there, and since moving down south, we made, and still make, the trip up north about 4 or 5 times a year. Needless to say, we are abundantly familiar with the interstate, and we're very familiar with the entire route, to be honest. The way we always go is by taking Route 64 to 295 before getting on the interstate, the beautiful I-95. It sucks. It's always filled with traffic, so naturally, the two of us leave at ungodly hours in the morning. This doesn't bother either of us, really, because we both wake up really early anyway. So, this trip started off like any other. We were out the door by 6:15, had our Chick-fil-A in hand by 6:30, and were filled up on gas and on the road by 7. The first part of the trip was fine. We put on some music, we talked about random stuff, and gossiped as mothers and daughters usually do. By the time we got to the 295 exit, it was still fairly early, but both of us were wide awake. She took the exit, and we were set. The road looked as it always did, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. After a few minutes of driving, though, something felt very wrong. Gone were the multiple lanes of the highway. We were now on what looked to be a country road. It cut through a cornfield and only had one lane of traffic in either direction. We were, as far as either of us could see, the only ones driving on that stretch of road. There was a little farmhouse on our right side, but that's about all. My mom and I were both really taken aback because we had just been on the highway. Neither of us had noticed any exits, nor my mom had gotten off on the wrong one. We had been on 295, and then suddenly, we weren't. My mom tried to rationalize it at first, saying that she probably wasn't paying attention because she had a bit of a headache forming and had just gotten off at the wrong exit. At the time, I agreed with her, but something felt very, very off, and suddenly, the Chick-fil-A breakfast wasn't sitting so well anymore. There weren't any signs for directions, only a few speed limit signs as we kept going. And when I looked at the dashboard clock too, only a minute or so had gone by. By the looks of it, we were in the middle of nowhere in Virginia. Time, to me, didn't seem to match up, but I just felt weird and dizzy at that point. My mom decided to keep driving forward. I don't know why she didn't just turn around so that we could go back, but she's always been the one to prefer to get actual directions. We didn't have cell service either, so that may have been why. That's pretty normal for rural Virginia, though. I work on a haunted farm during the Halloween season, so I'm pretty used to spotty reception. Cornstalks do not a cell tower make. Well, we kept on driving, and after maybe 15 minutes, we came to what I guess was this census-designated place's idea of a town. By this, I mean there was a service station and a church. We stopped the car, they filled us up, and my mom asked for directions. The guys were pretty nice, your typical laid-back Southerners. They did tease my mom for her New York accent, though. When we explained that we'd gotten turned around coming off of 295, they looked really surprised. The younger of the two guys said that coming from the direction we had, we were driving towards 295 north, not away from it. That really threw us for a loop. They asked if we'd ever done this trip before, if we were new to Virginia, stuff like that, and were very shocked when we said yes. We all got quiet after that, and my mom and I got back into the car and drove another 20 minutes to get back on the highway. Once we were back en route, that pit in my stomach went away. Neither of us really talked about it anymore, and we didn't mention it to our family once we got to Jersey. I've thought about this experience a lot since it happened, though, and I tried to rationalize it, but the more I think about it, I don't know, the weirder it gets. And sure, plenty of people make driving mistakes when they're tired, but my mom and I had both our coffee well before this happened. What really trips me up is how we were driving towards 295 and not away from it, and how far away from the exit we were on that country road. That, and how little time passed between being on the interstate and then not being on the interstate. Like I said, I thought I'd maybe just dreamt it. I was on the phone with my mom yesterday, though, and she brought it up out of nowhere. I guess she was thinking about it because we were trying to decide what to do for Thanksgiving. She asked if I remembered that time we teleported, which is a very funny way to start a conversation, but then it got serious and said that it freaked her out. She recounted the events almost exactly how I did here, except she did say there was a sign along the country road pointing toward the service station. Regardless of what actually happened, it was a bizarre and jarring experience. At least it taught me to always appreciate friendly gas station employees. I saw a house in the woods once, and then never again. This is a long story, so bear with me. I live in the rural Midwest. I'm uncomfortable with sharing my state or county, but just know that the population around here is low. It's mostly just farm towns around here, and I live in one. A short walk from my house, there's a trail that I've been walking down for most of my life. It's very shaded with trees, and the actual dirt path is pretty beaten up and hard to stay on if you don't know the land like I do. Almost 2 years ago now, I was walking the trail around 9 a.m. to get some fresh air before I had to go to work, like I usually do. I typically walk about halfway down and sit at a small creek, which is roughly, 15 to 20 minutes away from where I live if you're walking. I'm 100% certain that I walked the same way I do every time. Straight until you see the trail marker, which is a stump with some orange spray paint on the bottom. At the marker, I always turn left to get to the creek, and I cannot stress enough how many times I've done this exact walk throughout my life. The problem was that when I turned left into where the creek was supposed to be, it wasn't there. In its place, there was a really run-down white house that looked like it had been rotting there for decades. The place was huge, like a plantation house, but I don't live in the South. I'd never felt so confused in my life. I turned around almost immediately to make sure I was at the right trail marker, and sure enough, I was. I looked back at the house again and just stared. For every walk that I had been on in these exact woods, I had never seen this house before. It didn't make any sense. The place was absolutely huge. I pulled out my phone to try to take a picture, but no matter how much I messed with the power button, the screen would only flicker on for a few seconds and then go back to black. This freaked me out, and I tried to do a forced restart, but still nothing happened, so I just pocketed it. I ended up deciding that I was going to go inside the house and check it out. It's probably a stupid idea in hindsight, but I was too curious to leave. As soon as I walked in, the first thing I noticed was that it was like deathly cold in there. It was like walking into a fridge, and it didn't do anything to calm my nerves. Looking around, the main room was nearly empty, except for a desk all the way to the back left. There was a laptop on the desk that was opened to what looked like a Windows home screen. This worried me because I thought I had just walked in on some squatter's place, and I didn't have anything to defend myself with other than my phone that wouldn't turn on. To my right, there was this low electric buzzing coming from a cracked door. I walked over to it with my hands around myself because of the freezing cold. I peek inside and I see two very tall men in lab coats flipping through a notepad with light blue pages. And when I tell you they were very tall, I'm serious. Probably like 7 feet, and that wasn't even the weirdest thing about them. They were both pale and blonde and identical down to the shoes. They both had matching big eyes with pinpricks for pupils. The eyes were unfocused, like they weren't even trying to look at the paper, and it just felt very unsettling. Once the one on the left that flipped a certain page, they both started murmuring. It sounded like they were talking over each other very fast, and I don't know, I only caught some words. I think they kept talking about metamorphosis and hitting their long fingers against the paper like they were pointing. They kept mumbling in barely coherent English and nodding while making sounds like uh-huh and mm-hmm. I didn't get to hear much because the door creaked as I leaned in on it by mistake, and then they immediately went silent and they whipped their heads in my direction so fast I could have sworn that I heard a crack. Their pupils weirdly twitched into place to look at me, and I freaked the F out, man. I screamed and I bolted back for the front door. When I was running back, I hit something face first. I fell onto my ass and I dropped my phone before I could get to the door. I felt like I just got a face full of fabric, and when I managed to scramble to my feet, it was another one of the men in the lab coats. He was identical to the other two, and his pupils did that weird thing to look at me as well. I shoved him away and he sort of folded inward like he had no spine or chest bones before hitting the floor. I ran out the door and towards my home, never stopping for a second, even though I didn't hear anyone following me. I ended up running all the way to work, and when I made it, I saw my coworker, who we'll call Adam for the sake of privacy. Adam could see that I was shaken, and I explained the story to him, still freaking out and really almost crying. He listened to the whole thing and kept asking me if I was sure that it wasn't just a dream, and I insisted that it wasn't. I even told him that I lost my phone there and I needed to get it back. Adam told me that he'd go back with me after work to get it, and I agreed. I went through the whole workday still anxious, and then I went with Adam down the path. We took the same way I had walked this morning, and I'm absolutely sure of it. And when we got to the stump with the orange spray paint on the bottom, I couldn't believe my eyes. There was no house there anymore. It was the creek again, and I could see my phone sitting in a small patch of wet grass. I felt like I was going to throw up as I explained it to Adam that there was a house right here earlier today and that I wasn't crazy. Adam just grabbed my phone from the wet grass and handed it to me. He put his hand on my shoulder and directed me away from the creek. I kept trying to explain to him, and eventually he stopped me. He told me he understood and that things like that just happen around here. I tried to push him on what he meant, but he remained silent until he had to say goodbye at my doorstep. I work somewhere different now, but I still text Adam. When I tried to ask him about that day, he confirms he found my phone there and saw firsthand how genuinely shaken I was. But he won't elaborate on what he meant by things like that just happen around here, no matter how much I push. I still live there, and I still go on walks. I've never seen the house again, not even one like it anywhere near here, even when going off the trail. I still think about this event and get freaked out. There was something distinctly inhuman about the men that I saw, and I don't know how a whole house could simply appear and then disappear. The only explanation that I can come up with was that maybe I fell asleep at home before work and I dreamt it all, but it all felt so real. And that does not account for why my phone was actually at the creek when I went back. The universe is messing with me. I had something really weird happen today. I came out of the shower, I noticed my phone on top of my laundry hamper, and I thought, that doesn't look like my phone. And that was the last I remember seeing it. When I was leaving for work, I went to grab it, and it wasn't there. I then spent the next 10 minutes looking all over my house for it to no avail. I arrived at work late and phoneless. Fast forward to lunch, I went to my car and I suddenly got a weird feeling that led me to open up the door to the back seat. And there it was, sitting on the back seat in the hot sun, looking like my phone as opposed to before. Problem is, I wasn't in the back of my car today. It's probably been a week since I've even looked back there. How did that happen? I still think the universe is messing with me. About 6 months ago, I went to bed after watching an episode of a fun show called American Monsters about black-eyed kids. I woke up at 1:15 a.m. to a knock at my front door. You'd better believe that every atom in my adrenaline-filled body froze when a child's despondent voice answered my, "Who is it?" The child, who sounded to be around 10 or so, gave me a first and last name, and then asked if he could come in. But I'm not about to open the door to literally anyone at that time of night, let alone a child asking to come in after watching a show about black-eyed kids. But worried about him being alone outside in the dark, I called the police. I heard a small body slump down against the door, where it remained for several minutes. The police showed up within about 10 minutes. They searched my street and neighborhood as well as the next one over. Nothing. No kids. They also couldn't find anything on the name that I was given. Coincidence? Or does the universe know that I'm onto it and it's playing with me? Either way, outdoor security cameras went up within 24 hours. Please listen to this, coming from the biggest skeptic in the world. I have always been 50-50 on whether or not we live in a simulation. I've definitely had weird experiences or trips in the simulation experiences while either too high, greening out, or on psychedelics. Onto the story. So, I love to color. I usually print out coloring pages to color when I'm anxious or just waiting to pass time or take a break from social media. One of my favorite markers in the box that I use is called Tender Pink. There's about 30 markers in the box, give or take a few, and they all each have a slot to go in so you know whether or not you're missing any. I love pink, and I love this color in particular because it had a lot of ink. It wasn't dry or anything. Well, the other day I'm coloring, and I grabbed a pink marker, and it was super dry, and it was barely working. I looked at which shade it was, and it said Tender Pink. I thought, I was just using this color the other day, and it had so much ink. How did it run out so quickly? So I start to look in the box, and I find a second color named Tender Pink, which I used and realized it was the one that I had used the other day, the one with all the ink. Only, why are there two now? And why are there two of only this color? I was very vividly staring at two pink markers named Tender Pink. I would bet money on it. Well, fast forward to today. I'm coloring again, and I grab the Tender Pink and realize it's the one that has barely any ink, so I go to grab the other one, but it doesn't exist. It's not there. Every single slot is filled with a marker, yet there's only one Tender Pink shade, not two like there just was, and I feel like I'm going crazy. This is definitely one of the craziest experiences that I've ever had, at least while stone cold sober, regarding the simulation theory. I can see a grid in my day-to-day life. First off, I'm going to say that I don't do any type of drugs, not even weed. It all started when one time I woke up from a very strange lucid dream. And when I woke up, I saw a grid around everything in my room for a second. I think it may have been light green in color. I didn't have sleep paralysis when I woke up and saw the grid either. Another time, I had been awake for a while and was just scrolling through Reddit when I looked up at the white wall of my room and noticed a grid around one area. This grid was dark gray in color. I've seen the dark gray grid twice while looking at a section in my room. However, I feel like the grid is everywhere, and if you focus hard enough on it, it becomes visible. I've seen the grid twice in a way where it wasn't blurry or faded, and I can see the grid a lot in my day-to-day life. It's just usually more faded, so I'd have to focus more on it to notice that it's there. Even right now, I can see it, but it's faded. If you want, you can try to see it too. It's more obvious on a white wall in a room that's not super bright. By the way, I don't even meditate to see it or take any drugs. I also don't have any medical or mental conditions that would result in hallucinations. What do you think? Have you ever seen the grid? My C-section scar is gone. First post here, and I'm not sure what to think. I had my son last year in November, and I healed pretty quickly. I ended up having to have an emergency C-section, and I've been having some issues with my self-esteem because of the scar. It's one of those horizontal ones, and just a few minutes ago, I went to check it because it was itching, but it was gone. It was just nowhere, not even faded. I'm confused. I mean, I guess I'm happy, but like, how did that happen? I know it was there just yesterday, and it's always been there since November when I had my son. Scars don't just disappear like this, and especially not overnight. It was already healed, and there was no reason for it to just vanish like nothing had ever happened. Has anyone else had anything like this happen? Or do you have any thoughts on what this could be? The picture changed as I was holding it. This is a really small glitch, but I always think of it when I hear or read anything about a glitch in the Matrix, so maybe someone will find this interesting. This happened when I was little, maybe around 6 or 9 years old. I was standing in front of our house and I had my mom's keychain in my hands, which was a transparent plastic rectangle where you can insert one photo on either side. So one photo on side A and then another photo on side B. My mom had my picture on one side and my brother's picture on the other. I was holding it in my hands, turning it around to look at my picture, and then my brother's, and then mine again, and then his again. As I did this though, all of a sudden, both sides were of my brother. I remember being so confused and turning it around quickly to check if it had already corrected itself by then. I wasn't turning it around at such a speed that the photos would have gotten mixed or blurred or anything. I just didn't understand how that happened, and I wanted to show my parents, but obviously I couldn't, since by the time I got to my mom to show her, it was already back to normal. I don't know, this still confuses me to this day. Coincidence or simulation? For the past year, I've been experiencing something that's been tripping me out, and I just have to share it. Picture this. I'm multitasking, say watching a movie or listening to a podcast while scrolling through my phone. So I'm passively taking in whatever's playing in the background, but I'm actively reading something on my phone. Here's where it gets wild. Almost every day, whatever I'm reading on my phone aligns perfectly with what I hear from the TV or whatever podcast I'm watching at the time. And I'm not talking about common words. These are unique, specific words that aren't used in everyday language. For example, just recently, I was listening to a podcast that randomly mentioned Arkansas State at the exact moment I was reading those exact words on my phone. And this isn't a one-off. It's been happening consistently, and the most recent words that I can remember are pipeline and ankle. What are the odds of two completely different things and having a unique word come up simultaneously in both? It's so unexplainable to me, and I have really no idea what to make of it. Am I the only one that's experiencing this? Has anyone else in the world noticed these bizarre coincidences? This person includes an edit that says, "Let me make one thing clear. This is not advertisement related, and I can guarantee it. I'm actually very familiar with our phones listening to us and then spitting out ads. Here's another example that just happened. I'm currently watching a Twitch stream and working at the same time. I was typing out the word free, and the streamer I was watching said the word free at the exact time I was typing it. They're two completely unrelated tasks and also unrelated to any scrolling. It's just wild." I'm really starting to believe that I was a World War II pilot in a past life. I've been hesitant to post this anywhere or talk about it with anyone except for my closest friends and family members, but I thought you all here might appreciate it. Ever since I was literally a baby, I've been drawn to airplanes. My mom says that when I was less than a year old, I would reach for stuffed airplanes in the store and refuse to let go once she finally gave them to me. I also chose a baby swing that was shaped like an airplane, and it was in this that I said my second word after mama, airplane. This soon began to intersect with an inextricable attraction to World War II. At 2 or 3 years old, my mom says that as she was flipping through channels to get to Bob the Builder, I'd scream when she passed the History Channel, a demand to watch and then sit enraptured in front of World War II documentaries. Now keep in mind, this is when that channel covered actual history. Specifically, I was interested in World War II aviation, especially U.S. naval aviation. I had a huge coffee table book with a painting of the Battle of Midway, and I would apparently just sit for hours and stare at it. That interest continued all through my childhood. I refused to play with anything but toy models of World War II aircraft, constantly scribbled aircraft carrier battle scenes in my notebooks. I flew in a World War II B-17 at 7. I read untold dozens of books on the subject. We went to air shows, and at one point, I met with World War II pilots at one of those events. My dad left me alone with them and came back some time later to find me talking with them about things that I could have barely known. For example, how the visibility out the back of a certain plane's cockpit was hampered by the light conditions at certain altitudes and times of day. I also distinctly remember begging my grandpa to order me large die-cast model of the USS Intrepid aircraft carrier, and when it arrived, I tried to remove some of the small molded plastic aircraft from the flight deck, inexplicably drawn to the tiny versions of one plane, the Grumman Avenger torpedo bomber. I went on to start flying real planes at 12. I got my pilot's license at 17, and I joined the U.S. Navy ROTC to become a naval aviator. Throughout my training, my instructors would comment that I just seemed to know what I was doing, and the word natural was used frequently. I say this not to brag, but just to note that it was through absolutely no skill of my own. Okay, so nothing supernatural about that, right? I mean, lots of kids like airplanes and many people are interested in the Second World War, but here's the part that nags at me. For a long, long time, probably even before I had that interest in World War II, I've been having a recurring dream of what I now think of may be my past life. It's incredibly vivid and completely unlike any scene I've ever come across in a World War II movie, documentary, or anything. I've been having it once or twice a quarter for years, and it's exactly the same every time. In my dream, I'm flying a Grumman TBF Avenger over the ocean. It's dusk and clearly a Pacific sunset. The colors are rich reds and oranges, and the sun is slanting through billowing clouds in a way that I'd never, ever seen in my real life, until I visited Hawaii at age 21. I clearly recognized the cockpit of the Avenger from its distinctive greenhouse window bracing and its unique trapezoidal instrument panel. I look out the right wing, and it's full of holes and streaming a white fuel leak. Meanwhile, I can clearly hear the radial engine running rough as it dies, backfiring, coughing, spluttering. I call to my crewman over the intercom. Avenger had a 3-man crew, but there's no response. Either the intercom is dead, or they are. I know that I won't be in the air much longer, and I have to ditch. My hands fly over the cockpit in well-trained fashion, and I can distinctly feel the grip as I reach above and unlatch the canopy in preparation for ejection. I'm scared, but confident as I guide my plane down toward the water, flare, and then stall it into a light swell. The plane skips once back into the air, and then makes a loud shh sound as it settles into the water. Although I know that Avengers are known for floating, well after ditching, thanks to their large wings and fuselage, mine are full of holes, and I know that I don't have much time. Even as I unstrap my safety harness, I feel the huge engine up front start to pull the plane forward. As the aircraft tilts up and begins to sink nose first, I reach above me to pull back the canopy, which I had previously unlatched. However, the force of the impact must have jammed it shut. I reach up and I try to wrench it back, but it doesn't budge. As the water begins to cover the cockpit windshield, I start to feel a raw animal panic. I scream and I tear desperately at the canopy release, but with a sickening lurch, I feel the plane yield to gravity and begin its final descent. At that moment, I wake up, often bolt upright and covered in sweat. Now, I know this sounds a lot like the case of James Leininger, but I had truly never heard of that story until I woke up soaked one night in 2020 and Googled World War II Pilot Past Life. The similarities are eerie. I'm usually a pretty skeptical person, but I'm beginning to think that a past version of me flew an Avenger and died in the Pacific around 1944. Curious to hear your thoughts. I'm also going to an air show next weekend, the first one I've been to since I was a child. This air show is scheduled to feature multiple restored Avengers, and I'm planning to do whatever it takes to get the owners to let me sit in one, and I'll report back here. This person includes an edit that says, "Oh man, I can't believe I forgot one of the best parts until I was talking to my fiance about my post here last night. When I was about 7, and I know I was 7 because Drake and Josh had just come out, and I remember watching it after my flying sessions. I would play a flight simulator on my family's computer every night too. Again, nothing unusual about that. However, without fail, before I started flying in the game, I would pretend to be asleep on my couch, my bunk, before yelling, 'Now hear this, now hear this, pilots, man your planes.' Jolting awake, running upstairs, leaping over the arm of my computer chair and beginning to throw imaginary switches. And for those of you that aren't World War II nerds, that phrase is exactly how World War II U.S. Navy aircraft carriers would call pilots over the loudspeaker to begin a mission. Something that was absolutely not simulated in any of my games. Hey, Derek here. I'm going to try and stay in touch with this person so I can ask how his air show went after the weekend passes, and if there's any updates, I'll be sure to include them in the very next video that's available. But for now, let's do some more. Is that your mom? I'm not sure if this is a glitch, but if someone could help me understand, I would really appreciate it. My friend was coming to pick me up, and we were going to take a long drive to see another friend. I had asked my parents to watch my son, and while I was getting ready, I had this unsettling feeling that if I went, I wasn't going to see my son again, and that something bad was going to happen to me. But I kind of just brushed it off. My friend called and told me that she was almost at my house. I hung up, and then something yelled at me loudly, saying, "Do not take that long drive." I don't know, it literally freaked me out. I had never felt anything like that before. So now, I'm getting in my friend's car, and I'm thinking, how am I going to tell her that we can't go? But as soon as I get in, she starts to tell me, I don't think we should go. Something was telling me that if we go, something bad would happen to us. Then I told her that I was thinking of a way to tell her the same thing, and I explained what had happened to me while I was getting ready. We ended up just going to Winn-Dixie. It's a store that's about 3 minutes away from my house. She had some groceries that she needed to get, and we got some dinner together, and then she brought me back home. Now, it's dark outside, and we pull up to my house. As I'm about to get out, a car pulls up in front of us, and I just thought it was somebody going to my neighbor's house. As I'm walking to my door, my friend calls me and asks, "Is that your mom in the car? They keep trying to pull up like they want to get in your driveway." I had knocked on my door, waiting for someone to open it for me, but then I went to look in the car, and I was like, that is my mom, and I could see in the car because the middle light was on. I told my friend, "Why is she moving weird? Something's off, like the way she's moving is just different." And then I realized, that's not her car. Whose car was my mom driving? As I'm looking at my mom in this car I've never seen before, my mom opens the door for me to come inside. I tell my friend, "Oh no, wait, that's not my mom. My mom just opened the door." At this time, I didn't know what to think, and I went inside my house while my friend left. I went back to look at the car outside, and I saw a car turn into my neighbor's driveway, back out, and then leave. But I'm not sure if that was the car my mom was in or someone else's, so I don't know for sure where the car went after I finally went inside. I was just so confused about what had happened. I shared the first part of the story to show how the night started out a little bit weird, but then it ended, potentially, dangerous. Teleportation glitch while patrolling as a night guard. For several years, I worked as a guard at an office building which included 5 floors and 4 underground floors. The underground floors were mainly for parking. Every 2 hours, we needed to patrol all the floors starting at 5 and then go down each floor via the elevator. At floor -3, which is a parking lot, there's a long walk that connects the office building with a courthouse for cars to drive between the two. This takes about a 7-minute walk there. In my patrols, I need to go there to the checking points, but I never did this because no one instructed me on how to get to it. The few times I tried to find it by myself, at night by the way, it's pretty spooky, ended up with me being lost and having to go back. So I always pass that place, turn around, and then go to the elevator to get to the -4th floor. 2 weeks before my resignation, I told myself, what the heck, I'll go there again and I'll try to find it. So I got to the -3 level in the elevator, checked the nearest checkpoint with my work phone app. I need to scan a barcode with it. And then I continued to the courthouse. But here's the weird part. When I got to the place where the road to the courthouse is supposed to be, I found the wall of the -4th floor. I was stunned. I thought maybe I did go to the -4th floor by accident, which seems pretty weird by itself because every few meters there's a sign on the wall indicating which floor you're currently on. I went back, noticing now that every sign on the wall says -4. And I thought, okay, maybe I did go to the wrong floor after all. But when I got back to the elevator, it said -3. The hour was 3 a.m. I was alone, and you need a key, which I had one at the time, thankfully, to work the elevator. Above all that, when I start the patrol, I lock all the doors to the building so no one can get in while I'm not at the entrance. I know I didn't get to the -4th floor by accident while walking, since you need to walk about 10 minutes just to do that in a pitch black tunnel, which I never ever did since I'm afraid of the dark. Too many scary movies, I guess. That's the first and last time that I had a glitch in my life, and I really don't know how this could happen. This person says, I hope this made sense because English is not my first language. I think you did good, buddy. Still haunted, and it's been 12 years. Since childhood, I've been plugged in, connected, I don't know, however you want to put it, to the point where my parents were frightened and they took me to specialists in both mental health and the unexplained. 12 years ago, I opened up to my therapist about some of this, and she opened up to me, admitting that she's also trained in hypnosis, past life regression, and does things in the world of the unexplained outside of psychology. She offered a free, outside of therapy, past life regression session, admitting she was incredibly curious how it would be for me. The past life regression session went well, and here's some of the things that we discovered. I was able to confirm several things from different vignettes of memory that apparently actually happened/existed, and in one case, believed to have even found record of the person that I was. I don't think about those things too much. I mean, they're fascinating for sure, but I don't think they'll be explained or even need to be in this lifetime. What haunts me is that the last memory moment we explored. Haunting is what it feels like, but not necessarily in a negative or like a scary way, just that the sensations and the thoughts linger. I was definitely not human. I wasn't addressing this while under hypnosis, but I was describing things unhuman. I could feel the plates of my face and multiple parts of my mouth that worked together. I apparently was speaking in a different way and with different grammar than I always had been. And my therapist later said that it seemed like I was struggling with translation at this point. I remember the drive to find my child. I remember how white my surroundings were. I knew that I had been forced to kill and might need to do more to get my child. I could make internal and external noises. I mean, I don't know how else to describe that. And I saw things so differently. There was a metallic taste and a metallic, whispery noise enveloping me. The body sensations were intense, and I can still remember feeling all of my parts. My therapist brought me out of hypnosis because I started to panic and make noises that she, quote, did not like. This experience was odd and discombobulating overall, so my therapist didn't talk too much about anything in the moment, but over the next few months, we did discuss it. It seemed like maybe I was an insect, or maybe something that I don't even know exists, or my brain was just playing a little prank on us. Anyway, it's something I don't talk about much, but I think about fairly often. I found this subreddit today and figured I might as well share with people who may be interested. The Boy Who Ran. It was a school night and our family had just had dinner. It was rice-a-roni, meatloaf, and green beans. I hated it. Anyway, about an hour or so passes and I head upstairs to go to bed. Now, to get upstairs, we have two stairways. One leads to the kitchen, the other the living room, which then has a staircase up to the bedrooms. I take the staircase leading from the foyer to the living room, and as I head up the staircase, I see my little brother, who's about 5 at the time, run from his room to the bathroom, both of which are located on each side of the top of the staircase leading up from the living room. I say to him out loud, "Man, you better get to bed before you get in trouble." When suddenly, my little brother comes upstairs from the staircase from the foyer to the kitchen, which is a floor beneath me. And then he passes me and says, "Good night," then proceeds to go upstairs and then go to his room and close the door. I stand there, frozen. If my brother was downstairs, then who did I see run out of his room to the bathroom? Why did I think it was my brother? Or maybe I'm overthinking it and my brother just has super speed. I don't know. All jokes aside, I was so freaked out I ran upstairs past the bathroom without even looking to see what could have been in there and went into my room and I slammed the door shut. I waited that whole night for a face, but it never came. But this night stuck with me for a while, and I'm just curious. Does anyone have any theories on what that could have been? A coin just fell into my boot from a country I visited 10 years ago. I'm trying to make sense of what happened this morning to me while I was at work. I know it can't just be a coincidence. Both of those... coincidence. He said I'm trying to make sense, and he knows it can't be a coincidence. Both of those puns were intended because I use humor to cope with situations. While at work this morning, I was recycling some metal for the company that I work for. I was making laps from the table to the recycling bin as the metal is so heavy, I just carry one at a time. I'd been doing this for about a half an hour when I felt something fall into my boot. It's not an uncommon occurrence of things falling into my boots, considering I don't tie them up really tight, and my jeans usually rest inside my boots, like John Bender from The Breakfast Club. I feel it slide down my ankle and rest at the bottom of my boot and jiggle around while I finish making my lap. After tossing the metal in the bin, I take my boot off and shake out the debris that I felt fall in. As it falls in the dirt, I see that it's a coin about the size of a nickel or maybe a quarter. I think to myself, that's strange, because I didn't have any change on me that day, and I hadn't even used any cash in several weeks. I pick up the coin and I realize that it's neither a nickel or a quarter. It's a 20 sen coin from Bang Negra, Malaysia. My mind kind of froze when I picked it up. What in the actual hell? Why? How? When and what? I live in the US and I visited Malaysia probably 10 years ago, almost to the day. I had a weekend port visit there when I was in the Navy on a deployment. I did keep a couple of coins from the places I visited because it was just change that was left over from the trip, but that was 10 years ago. Plus, all of my change I collected from them is in my storage unit, and I haven't even seen that in years. I'm so baffled about what has happened that now I can't even currently focus at work. I need some kind of opinion or outside perspective that I can't think of as to what just happened. The boots that I wear are military style, but not the same boots from my deployment. Some of the comments in this story include people asking if he was thinking about his time in the Navy while doing laps. The OP said that he wasn't, and that he was actually happier not thinking about that time. OP also said that this part of his deployment was one of the least memorable. There were no excursions, nothing significant. He just ate at a couple of places, wandered the shopping malls, and he didn't even buy a souvenir. But this next one was kind of weird. Somebody commented, maybe it's a cry from help from the storage unit. They said they know that sounds silly, but it still might be something to check on. OP says, there may actually be some relevancy in this comment. I'll try to head over to it sometime today or tomorrow, and we'll follow up with the results from said visit. And of course, if there's any follow-ups that I need to add concerning this story, I'll be sure to do so in the next episode. Ring goes missing for a year and then reappears exactly where it disappeared. A few years ago, I found a beautiful tanzanite and diamond ring on sale at a jewelry shop. I was able to do a layaway plan over 4 months and finally brought it home. It's the most expensive piece of jewelry I've ever owned, and I loved this ring. At the time, the ring fit perfect. However, about a year ago, I needed to resize it as I'd put on some weight. I put the ring in its box and bag, took it to my car, and placed it in my glove compartment while I ran some other errands. I ended up having to go home before I made it to the jewelry shop, so I left the ring in the car, which was parked in my garage, by the way, and I planned to take it the next time I was out. 2 days later, when I pull up to the jewelry store, I went to get the ring out of the glove compartment, and it wasn't there. I tore the car up looking for it, but it was nowhere. I go home, and I check everywhere just to be sure that the ring really is gone. The only thing that I can think of is that someone got into my car during my errands and took it. Over the last year, I've cleaned and vacuumed my car many times, always hoping I would somehow find the ring. About 3 months ago, I bought an even smaller, cheaper version of the same ring just because it was tanzanite, but it wasn't as nice as my original ring. Well, 4 days ago, I hopped in my car, and guess what was sitting on the passenger floorboard? The bag with the box that had the ring inside of it, packed up and ready for the jeweler, with the original receipt and everything. I have absolutely no idea where this ring could have been for the last year, and no clue how it would even be possible to miss it in the meantime. I mean, I've torn this car apart multiple times looking for it. It's like it somehow just moved forward in time, and nobody else drives my car. I don't know. What do you think happened?